I've got some experience with chainsaws over the past 25 years or so. So you move out into the country or to subdivision where you have a little bit of land, a couple trees. You want to cut stuff. You want a chainsaw. So what do? You trot down to the Lowe's and buy a new one. Go to the Tractor Supply or Rural King or Walmart or Menards or whatever you have close by. Ace. Get yourself a nice budget beginner model chainsaw. Is that how you handle it? I'm here to say that's probably the wrong approach. Do you find one used on Craigslist or Facebook or some other way, newspaper or word of mouth? Or do you go to the store and buy a brand new one? Do you go to the dealer or do you go to a department store? Do you stop by the Home Depot or Rural King or Menards or Ace? Or do you go to a dedicated Stihl dealership, Husqvarna dealer, Efco dealer? So many options. How do you choose? I've got a few tips for you, and I've got a story for you too. I think it'll help you make up your mind. These stories and tips that I've developed over 25 years, it'll help you make up your mind about what you want to do with purchasing your first chainsaw. I advise buying used. I advise buying proper models, which are made with high quality, which are top-end professional saws. I advise buying them older, but in good condition. It's a sweet spot. It takes some work to find it, but it's worth it. I've had a fascination with chainsaws for a long time, and there's a story to it. Of course, when I was a kid, we used chainsaws with my dad and my granddad to cut firewood. That was my first introduction, and I thought it was really fun. We would go out in the woods and cut firewood and enjoy nature, enjoy each other's company. It was a great time. As I became an adult, I burned firewood for heat in the house. I needed a saw, and as I grew older, I became a homeowner. I needed to trim up brush and cut trees and cut firewood, so I needed saws. First saw I bought was a Husqvarna. I bought a Husqvarna because I thought the brand was good. And the brand is good overall, but the one I bought was a real problem. I probably bought the cheapest, junkiest Husqvarna model ever made. The most entry-level, cheaply manufactured piece of plastic junk garbage that I've ever seen. That thing didn't run right from day one. It was hard to work on. Parts were hard to find. And parts were as expensive as throwing the saw away and buying a new one. It obviously wasn't made to be worked on. The second saw I got, I thought was a great deal. It was $50. I found it, I think, in the newspaper or Craigslist. I bought it, took it home. It ran pretty well, and I thought I'd gotten a great deal. I told a friend of mine who owned a tree service that I bought this Poland saw for $50. He told me, "You wasted your $50. He was right. I used that thing for a little while. The first time I tried to use it, I put it onto a limb that was literally maybe only 3 inches around. I attempted to saw that thing, wide open throttle, smoke rolled off the limb, and it didn't cut it. The chain was so dull, and it had a safety chain on it that really was designed more for safety and low kickback than it was for cutting. And after a little while, that little Poland vibrated so much that my hands would tingle. It was a terrible feeling. And believe it or not, I used that saw for a couple of years. I used the bar and chain from my old junky Husqvarna with a 3/8 low pro chain that would actually cut. I put it on the $50 Poland, and I cut for a couple of years intermittently, and it did the job. It cut some small stuff, but it was never a pleasure to use. And eventually, of course, the paper thin fuel hoses, the sorry carburetor, and other plastic junk, low quality parts gave out. And the saw obviously wasn't made to be worked on. I noticed right away as I took it apart, there were nuts near the carburetor intake that if they became loose would be sucked straight into the intake and ruin the engine. Then came this one. This is a 288 Husqvarna, 288 XP. When I bought that saw, it was way too big for my needs. I really didn't know what I was getting into. It was an 88cc professional grade saw made for loggers, basically. But when I fired that thing up, I could feel the power of that thing, and it was so smooth. It had a larger 3/8 chain, regular style 3/8 full chisel chain. It would cut through wood like butter, not even ask questions. The thing to this day runs smoothly, cuts great. I've hardly had to work on it other than basic maintenance carburetor kits over the last 20 years. Maybe I've put one in it. But other than that, the thing runs and runs, starts great. It's just, you can just tell there's a huge difference in quality between a professional grade, high-end saw and a beginner budget model or a homeowner, farmer, rancher chainsaw. Now this got me thinking, and over the years it really intrigued me that companies make bottom-level saws, mid-level saws, and pro-level saws. So you can't go by the brand name alone. And that Poland that I mentioned earlier, Poland over time has made some really great saws, but that low-end junker saw that I bought was terrible. Also, a brand name doesn't really tell you who's behind the company because they're bought and sold, merged and acquired time and time again. So a saw that was made by a certain company during a certain time range will be totally different from a saw from the same manufacturer maybe 10 or 15 years later when different people own and run and control the company and make decisions for the company. It's my opinion that in the old days, in the 1980s, 1970s, early 1990s, that saws and other equipment were made with quality more as a focus. Now the focus seems to be make them as cheaply as possible, maximize profit, get them out the door and sold, and make them only as durable as the warranty requires. And if they break after the warranty period, great, they'll have to buy another one. I don't think these old ones were made with that in mind. These things, they have some plastic on them, but they also have a lot of metal. And when you dig inside, you'll find many, many differences between a professional grade saw and a low budget homeowner saw. I will put up a list from different manufacturers of saw models that have proven their mettle over time. They've proven their durability, reliability, initial quality, and ease of maintenance. These professional saws have more power, they're smoother to run, they have better vibration control, they're manufactured with better materials. I've got my phone here with some notes on it. Now, pro saws have certain features that you won't know unless you dig inside and take it apart, but they matter, okay? Professional grade saws typically have a flat bottom cylinder that mates to the case with a gasket. So people like that because that can be changed, it can be modified, that can be lowered to get more power and performance. If you ever want to modify or port your saw, a pro level saw has that feature. Pro saws typically have closed transfer ports for better performance. Now some don't, but in general, the high-end pro saws do. In addition to the mechanical parts being higher quality in a pro grade saw, the carburetors and or fuel injection system are way better than the low-end budget model chainsaws. There again, you can't tell the difference just by looking. You can tell by feel sometimes, but it matters, believe me. The pro saws have higher quality electronics, especially in the coil for producing spark. The lower end saws just have cheaper everything. Pro saws typically come with rim sprockets, which is different than a spur sprocket. If you look into that, you'll see the difference. It makes a big difference in how the saw behaves, and it makes it easier to work on, easier to replace the sprocket when it wears out. It runs smoother, supports more of the chain. It's a better setup altogether. The pro-end saws come with chains made for cutting, not for safety. The low-end budget saws have chains that are less efficient at cutting and more efficient at keeping the company out of lawsuits from kickback, the situation where the bar kicks back. Pro saws don't have that. They're more interested in doing their job than keeping the lawyers happy. Okay, pro saws typically are sold through dealers who offer full support and maintenance for that saw. If you buy a saw at Lowe's, you're unlikely to get a lot of good support for that saw. The saws have typically a solid metal two-part crankcase on the bottom that comes together, and then the cylinder comes on top. It's a three-piece system, and that metal crankcase that's in two parts holds the crank bearings very steadily, holds them in place very securely to make the bearings last longer and to make them much stronger. Cheaper saws have plastic parts down there where the bearings are and metal parts only at the cylinder and piston. It's just a cheap throwaway setup. It's cheaper to manufacture, cheaper to make, cheaper to sell to you. They make more profit, and then they wind up in the landfill a couple years later. You don't want that. The pro saws are typically made to run longer every day. Occasional use saws, low-end saws, are just not made durable enough for that. They're made for occasional use. For some people, maybe that's enough. But I would argue that even for someone who uses a saw occasionally, it's a lot more pleasurable to use a saw that will run and start and perform than one you have to fiddle with. The pro saws have better balance. They just feel better in your hand, and they have better vibration control between the engine and the handle. That old Poland, $50 Poland that I had was hooked directly to the bar and chain. The bar and chain and engine were hooked directly to the handle, so every little vibration went straight into my hands. That can cause actual nerve damage if you use that too much. That's terrible. The engines on pro saws come with more power. They have higher compression engines. They're made to produce more power. They're harder to pull that handle, so the typical desk jockey isn't going to even be able to start them. But someone who's strong and who's a logger doesn't mind pulling a little bit harder on that handle to get it started. Another typical feature of pro saws, of course, is they cost more. When they're new, they're higher priced. That's why I argue for staying with high end, but buying older saws that are in good condition. They've got a lifetime of use left in them, but you can get them at a fraction of the price if you just look, you know where to look, and if you have knowledge of which models have a good reputation and which don't. That's what this video is about. I'm going to show you a list of saws that have been proven over time to perform and perform and perform. If you buy a saw off this list, you're going to be happier. I guarantee it. This old 288 has quite a story. This is a pretty big saw, and back in the day, people used to log with this thing. Now it's pretty much retired. I consider it like a thoroughbred. We live near Lexington, Kentucky, which people call the horse capital of the world. There are thoroughbred horses who win races, then they retire onto stud farms. This saw has about the same history. I think it was used by more serious logging type operators. And then I bought it used, and it's lasted me forever and ever, and it's continued to run beautifully. It's here at the retirement ranch for chainsaws. It gets used a little bit, but not hard like when she was young. Life's too short for a bad chainsaw. Get a good one. If you get a good used one that's a pro model saw, you'll save money and it'll last the rest of your life, most likely. What I've provided here is a starting point for finding a good chainsaw. If you know of a good saw that isn't on this list, put it in the comments. Let this be a reference for those looking for good, affordable, quality, professional chainsaw.